Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Rabbit House Press Author Spotlight. Joining me today is Frances Strickler, and it is the wonderful publication day of Hardly a Lady, her wonderful new book, Hardly a Lady, which is fiction, but it's fictionalized, as we like to say. Welcome, Frances.
Hi, how are you? And glad to be here.
I'm so glad and congratulations on Publication Day, April 17th,
Uh, Thank you so
2025.
much, and for all you've done.
Well, we at Rabbit House Press love this book and love you. I'm going to introduce the book by reading a little bit from the back by
Okay.
Harry, who has been very helpful in bringing this book to life. Um, about Hardly a Lady. Who we are is sometimes something very different than who we've been. As 94-year-old Josie enjoys her granddaughter's engagement party, she thinks about what people see and the secrets she'll like to take to the grave as she recollects her life as a small town girl learning to make it on her own in the bigger cities of northern Kentucky. Set in the 1930s, Hardly a Lady is part historical fiction, part thriller, and all gripping. Frances Strickler captures the differences between two worlds in the same state, rural Kentucky, and the burgeoning Newport, while illustrating Josie's life lessons that sometimes the glitter and glamour of nightclub life has a dark and dirty underside. Liz Carey. And that's what I loved so much from the moment I read the first manuscript of this was that it captures so perfectly the two different Kentuckys. Can you talk a little bit about who Josie is, our heroine of the book? And let me show you
And
the back of
the real person behind the Josie
Yes.
is or actually Josie. It was based somewhat on my mother-in-law, Goldie Strickler, who won all kinds of sewing and awards as a teenager, which I did not know about until she was in her, well, almost until the time she died, close to the time she died. And they were all the information was in her diaries that she had kept. And so I got reading this and I knew that she was a farm girl from northern Kentucky. And all the things about the northern Kentucky lifestyle, and just within a few miles was Newport, which was mob central
And
during the 30s
tell
as
back up
well.
to
And I'm
tell the
going,
readers.
is this the nice?
I was going to say back up if you can back up and tell the readers because this happens in 1930. Can you tell the readers what 1930s Newport, Kentucky represented?
Okay, Newport, Kentucky, because of course Prohibition was coming close to an end, but it wasn't really. But they had competing mobs in New York and around the Detroit area, they had two competing mob groups. And so to get a little bit of just a better place to base their operations, they came to Newport, Kentucky, because it was very accessible. All of
So there
their
were
pipelines
bootlegging and
for alcohol, drugs, gambling, all those things came together. And of course, then later on, they were run out and they went to the casinos in Las Vegas and out to Nevada. But the competing mobs from the Chicago area, really the Chicago, Detroit area, and then the New York, they were competing with each other in the prohibition with the all the liquor and all of that, and they came together, basing their casinos and their sort of their dance halls, casinos, alcohol sales. They had all of their girls, the show girls. So they had these big centers, and so they had in Newport, up and down the streets of Newport, they had all these like casinos and sort of houses of prostitution, and they were paying cab drivers to bring in people from Cincinnati, and they were paying them a percentage um, to to bring people to their casinos, to visit their houses of ill repute, all these things in there. So they had day houses and night houses, and the day houses were then people that visited the brothels and the casinos during the day, and then maybe worked the night shift or whatever in Cincinnati, or went to Cincinnati. And then they had the night houses. People worked during the days, and the cab drivers and that would bring them in and get their little share of the money, and they would drop their people off. And so the cabbies were getting like 40% of all the profits that they brought in. They would bring in people from Cincinnati, the airports. They were getting a big percentage. Well, my heroine Josie, because that's just a few miles apart. But I thought, well, what if Kentucky Farm Girl, what if those two worlds align with each other? How would they blend? And what would happen? And it just happens that the heroine of the book, Josie, was just a normal, average Kentucky farm girl that, and during the Depression, of course, they had a lot to eat, but not much spare money. But they did have food because they had eggs and cows and chickens and, you know, things for food, but not necessarily for cash, a big cash flow. And I thought, you know, if they would connect, because there was a lot of cash flow in Newport, but so I thought, well, how would
And
a
you
girl connect?
and you have to
And
say like
so,
it was because um Josie, based on your mother-in-law, correct?
uh-huh,
Um,
yes,
she was the part with her dad. The farm was her father passed away and left the farm her to have to deal with the farm all by herself. It
yes.
was that fiction or nonfiction?
No, that was also nonfiction. Her mother died on her 17th birthday, and her father took the farm until her father died. And
She needed the money from however she could.
right, she did, and she worked in Cincinnati. Well, she rode the same route as the people that went down Monmouth Street. So she had that same route. And it happened, though, that in 1931, when she was still in high school, and both of her parents were still alive, that she won all these awards for her sewing
Going and
and went to Chicago. And this was a great trip that they took in Chicago. And they went to all these fantastic places. They stayed in the really nice hotel,
it
and
was
they
so
saw
beautiful
all
how
these.
you describing those hotels. I and on her visit, would you I didn't mean to interrupt you about saying that, but I wanted you to read a little bit.
Okay, I'll read the beginning where she's actually looking back on her life, and so this is at the end of her life in 2010, where she's actually, and in fact there was a party, but this was all fiction. I mean, this is mostly fictionalized, but maybe not all. Um, it is the 10th of July, and I'm tired. My bones ache in places I didn't know I had bones. I will admit, though, I'm happy, very happy, I think. I thought happiness was beyond me at this point in my life. What a surprise it is that I feel the rush of excitement and delight I firmly believe was gone forever. I'm attending a reception to celebrate my granddaughter's engagement. I'm 94 years old and never believed I'd make it this long. Some days I believe my long life is a punishment for past sins instead of a gift. And for this special event, I'm wearing a lovely watered silk purple dress with flutter sleeves and a v-neck. It is the most exquisite dress I have ever worn. And of all the beautiful dresses I have bought or made, I think this unquestionably is the most elegant. At my throat, I wear a pearl-shaped amethyst necklace anchored to the chain by 3 carat diamond, which my daughters believe is fake. And I've watched them snicker and nod as they shift it around in my jewelry box. And they glance at each other and they shake their heads, and their tight smiles say, well, who the hell is going to have to deal with this godly thing after she's gone? And I smile and I nod to myself because I know I didn't think. The matching earrings have diamonds, which are quite small, and the clip-ons pinch more than they used to. And they leave little dimpled indentions in my ears, which seem to have grown larger and coarser than when I was young. And my granddaughter, lovely girl, will inherit this piece of jewelry. And she can appreciate it or sell it. I don't know which, but at any rate, it'll make a valuable gift. And I don't take a deep drag of my cigarette, pull off my earrings, and stick them in my purse for safekeeping, as I once would have done at a reception. Come to think of it, I didn't have a cocktail either. Someone handed me a plastic glass of some frozen lemonade punch that lacked the kick. It was nasty tasting stuff. Heaven only knows what the expressions would be if I pulled out a cigarette from my tiny clutch purse. And this purse is so small it can hold no more than a packet of Sin Sin. That was the breath perfume of choice in my young days. A linen hanky, and maybe one small hand-rolled cigarette, maybe a lucky strike. I gaze at the purple shimmering fabric and notice the edges have grown a bit frayed at the edges. And it's a treasured reminder of times and people of the past. Oh, for the days when I could ask the adorable young man sitting next to me for a light and to run and classic or dirty, preferably dirty. Excuse me. Would he look at me, grin just enough to let his dimples show, light my cigarette, fingers softly wrapped around mine, and unwrapped his elegant long body out of that dinky little chair and run off to do my bidding? Oh, gasp, shock. There's no smoking here and no granny drinking. Maybe if I could pull it off, I'd sneak outside. But how does one sneak outside in a wheelchair? All in all, it seems this is the best party I've ever attended. I've gone to wonderful parties in my lifetime and I've worn gorgeous dresses. But this time I've had the best of both. Funny, isn't it, how your kids and grandkids see you as a sweet little old granny? My older daughter comes to me and offers to put a blanket over my lap and asks if I'm feeling chilly. No, thank you, dear, I say, trying to divert her from hovering. My younger daughter comes over and speaks loudly into my face, assuming I can't hear her, and asks if I've taken my pills. Yes, dear, I tell her every damn one of them. And I need to be kind. They're trying to be helpful, but instead they seem annoying. I may be old, but I'm not frail or helpless. And one of their friends comes over and she sits down beside me and she pats me on the hand and she chatters mindlessly about the party. And then she leans into my face and asks me, now, can I ask you how old you are, Mrs. Roush? And I answer her with a whisper as I lean toward her and I said, can you keep a secret? And of course, she says. So can I responded as I turned and wheeled away. I giggled to myself because I was not always nice, not always old, and hardly ever a lady. My goal as a girl and a woman was to design and make beautiful dresses for the stars. Well, sometimes your dreams can take a bit of a twist. I intended to sew for the stars, but ended up getting involved with the mob. It's hard to explain this to these well-meaning but ignorant young people. They're certain they all have answers to all the questions, and the truth lies in my journals. I tried to be honest and faithful to them over the years. Okay,
Oh,
and that was Josie speaking.
oh my goodness. Everybody, that's hardly a lady. Now,
She made those dresses by the way when she was 16 years old.
she made those dresses when she was, and that was her best friend. And this
Uh-huh.
is the real Josie.
Yeah.
Frances Strickler's who we're talking to, and Hardly a Lady is out today. You can get your a copy at rabbithousepress.com. You can also get it from Amazon or Barnes& and Noble or local bookstores, anywhere you buy your books. But it really is, like Liz Carey said, it's part history, part thriller, but a part history lesson of the 70s. I know you were speaking as the older Josie. Much of it is you weave in Josie's diaries from when she's like 16, I think, something like that. Throughout when she's
Yeah, 14 to 24.
14 to 24. And so
Mhm,
these are the real diary entries of your mother-in-law, correct?
mhm. Right, right.
Did
But
you
that was a Josie that mhm.
did you write when you found these diary entries, did you want to write a book around them or did that come later?
That came a little later. She wanted me to burn them, to get rid of them. And I thought, no,
Wow.
he was in the hospital. But she was 97 at that time. And she said, no, just
Wow,
burn them
so
to
to
get
be
rid of them.
97. Good for her.
Yeah. And she said, just burn them, get rid of them. Those times are over. And I thought, oh, not for me. They're not.
Not for me, they're not. I mean, it's fascinating the difference. I mean, between really being a farm girl. I mean, everything. Can you speak a little bit about her farm life in rural Kentucky and where that was?
Well, she was in Alexandria, Kentucky, but it was kind of a little bit odd that just up the road it was also she was in California, Kentucky. We lived on this road in Alexandria, coming out from the town of Alexandria. All of a sudden, then you're in California, Kentucky. It's a really
Was
kind of
California.
strange. And then it's Alexandria, and so we drove out there because I wanted to, and actually found the place where Jenny Mays and her parents lived. Jenny May, the character
Hey,
in the
it's her
book, and
best
her
friend
parents lived.
and partner in
And
crime.
yeah, and talked to the girl that lived there. And she led us through the house, which I had been there in early marriage when the family was still there. But so I got an idea, and it was like the young lady explained that Alexandria was in the house where the best friend's family had lived, and you could see California. So I don't know how that part of the world worked, but they were farm people. They raised a lot of produce. Of course, those small family farms, you had a couple of cows, and some chickens, and they made their living mostly by her and how her father made a lot of his living by raising, training, and selling horses. Mostly plow horses, and but they did have chickens, and in fact, I won't give that part away,
And
um,
so she goes
but
from this world of, I mean, just that her father was so sweet, this really wonderful, wholesome life, to she wins a contest at the 4-H contest and goes to
right,
Cincinnati, is introduced to this big city life and basically falls into being a seamstress for, would you call it a brothel or would you just call it a,
yes.
yeah.
Well, it was a casino, actually. It was a casino, nightclub, because all of those, there were a lot of those along the strip there. But it was a casino, nightclub, the third
And
floor for the ladies who entertained the men who came in.
right, a third floor for that,
So,
right. And so she's
yeah,
making costume changes and it was so, I mean, the dialogue between the dancers or and the ladies that were entertaining the men and her fixing their costumes and the madam who I know you have a bit to that. It's just it's such a, it's like a movie reading it. It's really, really, really interesting. And the love triangle that goes in between and the FBI agent that happens to Graham that happens to was Graham a real person as well? There was an FBI agent
no, no, no.
investigating.
Yeah,
So yeah,
Graham was not a real person,
you were like, we need to throw
but
was
but the
John
FBI
Wayne.
people who's I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't
I'm
mean to
sorry,
interrupt you.
Was Jimmy Lee a real person?
No, no, he was because she met this person. Of course, he's fictitious, but she met him when he was up because he was kept the books. I won't give it to say anymore, but kept the books at this place and where she went to work. But again, now the real Josie and Josie. fictitious Josie, they were so, the big entertainment for young girls in that age, the big thing that they spent their money on when they had money was to go to the movies. And so when she was offered the job of working with seamstress with in this organization, she, all she could see was all these like these big musicals, the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, the big shows that were put on. And the first time she had a date with this Jimmy Lee, he took her to a restaurant called the Flamin' Glow, which was
I
kind of a
love
takeoff on
that.
the
The flaming
flamingo.
one. Yeah, I love that.
So the real place was Flamingo, but this was the
Oh, okay.
Flamin' Glow. So,
Yeah, I like that. I love that.
so she took, so they had a big floor show. And so, these, it's because at 14 to 24, she gradually matured through her experiences. But at first, of course, she's, I mean, she lives on a farm in northern Kentucky, and all of her friends and neighbors, their social life is going to high school basketball games and going to church,
Right, right.
church functions.
Suddenly she's like
That's
just
all they do.
wide-eyed in this new world. And how far away was Newport from Alexandria?
Oh, maybe 30 miles.
So, yeah, because it seemed like when she would go back to visit home, it wasn't that far to when she was back at
Yeah.
work in that.
Yeah, I'm thinking, to me now, get a car, it just seems like it takes 10 minutes. But I'm guessing because, of course, Newport is right across the river from Cincinnati. And then Alexandria is just stair steps away from Newport. So it's, I would say, at probably at best
So is
30
that
miles.
why Newport became sort of the hub of that mob scene because it was right across from Cincinnati, right across from the river,
Yes.
and they could get.
And the history of Newport and, of course, Cincinnati, they used to have the river traffic, and then they used to have a lot of military, people along that area. And so drinking was, I mean, that's what people did. They did a lot of drinking. And so that just was the very place to bring their undercover things during Prohibition down where they had that flow of river traffic, and they had all those, basically a big field of people to work with, all those military folks around that they could have, who needed prostitutes and liquor and all those kinds of things. So um, if people are, the Newport Gangster tours would be a really interesting tour for people who have not been on it. It was, it's Southern Living says it's one of the 10 most exciting things to do in the
I guess
South
you told
or in
me that.
Kentucky.
Yeah, you told me that in writing Hardly a Lady, and you had the diaries of your mother-in-law who had gone through all this, but you said that going to the Newport gangster tours is what really sparked your mind as an author to write. Is that right?
Right, because I thought, how can these two worlds blend in some way? Because they're so different.
Right.
And I thought, yeah, because she was very talented and, in fact, is in the University of Kentucky Junior Hall of Fame with her sewing. So, and I thought that's how you would get it. That would be the connection that you might
Right.
get.
Right, right. And so when you were going through the tour, can you tell us a little bit about the gangster tour?
Well, well, I guess I shouldn't mention any names, but the gangster tours are done. They take you to some of the places that were actually, they take you up and down the center of where Mama Street. They take you up and down the area that was, and he takes you on foot um, to the places who are now, kind of cleaned out, but uh, that were now, that were then these just rows of kind of casinos and gambling places and houses of prostitution. but you went from place to place, and all of them had little neon lights up, and so he takes you and explains the history
From here and see.
of a lot of these places.
Yeah, that's what,
He
and the
takes you and
mobster, the pictures that you had of those mobsters that didn't end up in the cover, but I mean, there were some really interesting pictures of those men. Were those real, like, mobsters?
they were pictures that were in the newspaper at the time, and it was called Newport was called Sin City.
Sin City?
Sin City. And there was there's it's a in the references, it's a dissertation by, and I'm not trying to think who did this, but it was Sin City, Kentucky. It's Kentucky's, you might look it up on the website, but Sin City, Kentucky, Newport, Kentucky, Vice Heritage and its legal extension, 1920 to 1991, on the website there. And if you just Google there, Sin City, Kentucky, I'm
Wow.
sure you
I mean,
can
because
find
everybody, when I'm
links to this
talking,
article.
yeah, when I talk to people about Hardly a Lady and what it's about, they're like, "Oh, you mean in Newport? You mean in Newport when that was happening?" So, before we do another reading, I would love to hear just a little bit about you and your life as an author, and how your first book. Tell me the name of that again.
That was A Long Way Home, A Soldier's Story.
Which
And that is a let's see, that is a book dealing with, I'm trying to find things about Kentucky history that a lot of people don't know a lot about. And this book was about uh, actually based on the life of my great grandfather, who smuggled um,
So,
Union recruits from Tennessee, Kentucky, and North Carolina through enemy lines. And he smuggled them. He smuggled like 900 men over 1,200 miles
wow.
through enemy territory to find safe places for them to go in Kentucky to merge them with units in uh, Ohio and Kentucky. And so I feel like a lot of people don't know what pilots were during the Civil War
And
and
I
then how
learned
they
it
were
through
related.
reading that book of yours. I learned it through reading that book of yours, and it was so interesting because it really brought to life the Civil War and in the most personal way. And with that soldier and then and him hiding out with the family, that was based on your great grandfather bringing the young man. I forgot the soldier's name.
Well, Andrew Fondren was the soldier, and he brought all these people through, and a lot of these things that happened were based on fact.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so a lot of the things that occurred to that,
And you wrote the
they
beautiful
were.
love story, and you mixed in the love story.
So it's so funny because so many men want to read it, and women are saying, "Oh, it's a Civil War story." I don't know if it's something I want to read, but
Oh no,
it seems
really,
like that. I don't
it's a
know.
wonderful story. So were you a history major, or were you
I
got
was
you?
English and history major at University of Kentucky, and
Okay.
so when we moved back, um, my husband's from Franklin, Kentucky, and when we moved back to Franklin, I went to work at the vocational technical school and actually worked, excuse me, in Glasgow, Kentucky, at trying to work with remedial students so that they could enter the nursing profession, so they could enter nursing school at the Glasgow School for Practical Nurses. And that was all part of the technical school system. And then I went back to, because I ended up with so many single parents. So women who were single parents. Then I ended up going back to school and getting my master's in counseling. And then I went on to get more in psychology at Western Kentucky. And then I got my
You
mental
got your
health
master's
counseling
in
license.
psychology. So you
Yes,
first you got your bachelor's from the University of Kentucky in history and
and English.
and then you went back and got that what was the third degree you got?
Well, I got my master's in rank one in counseling, and then I got well, I did not quite complete a master's in psychology. I got a lot of hours because then I went ahead and took the exam to get a counseling license for mental health counseling. So I
Wonderful.
went into that.
Wow.
And then I'm sort of, as I got through more of that, as a because of course counseling has a lot to do with meditation and the brain and trauma. And so I got into yoga from there.
Which I
And
love.
then I went ahead and got my 200-hour yoga
Yeah, and so
certification.
that's
And
what
then I
you
went ahead
do
and got
now. You
500
teach
hours of yoga.
and you teach yoga
So I
now.
teach yoga.
I love
Yeah. And so I've been teaching workshops like trauma workshops and anxiety workshops for yoga students
yes, yes.
because that blends a lot of things. But
Oh,
but, but my writing is
that's really wonderful. That's really wonderful. I mean, you've got such a diverse life, but it all does, of course, come together, and I love the way you mix history with the personal stories, and you really it is like learning about Kentucky and learning about these different things, and then there's also just you don't shy away from any kind of harsh realities of like with the relationships and with all of this. Can you read a little bit more from Hardly a Lady?
okay. As I went through, because I wanted her, because as she matures, her mentor is Ms. Florine, who works for the place where she goes. And so
Flow and the flow and glow, right?
that, well, actually, the hey ho,
Oh, the
the
hey-ho.
hey
Oh,
ho,
okay.
so
Hey-ho. Was that
the hey ho is where she works, but the Flame and Glow is where she first went with Jimmy Lee to the restaurant. The
oh
hey ho, I think that was a sort of a takeoff on the name of the Heidi Ho or one of those, the names of the real places, but I call it the Hey Ho because that's what was there.
because that's right. That's how that but that was again also the that's where she was working as a seamstress for okay, so just to
Miss
set
Florine.
for Miss Flooring. Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah. And so now this is when Jimmy Lee, who is her sort of the guy that gets her into this kind of leads her the segue into this life.
mhm.
And so he's taking her to meet Miss Florine, who for the longest time she did not realize that was what Miss Florine was.
Right.
She just thought she was this nice lady taking care of her.
Yeah.
Okay. On the third floor, we walked down a long hallway covered with a beautiful Persian carpet, ending in a marble offset leading to an apartment. Jimmy raised the knocker shaped like a lion's head on the thick wooden door. Moments later, an elegant, diminutive, white haired lady answered the knock. A simple whiff of scent that I learned was Joy by Jean Pateau enveloped her. Well, hello there, she said. I am Florine Ricci, and you must be Josie. She was a full chested woman dressed in a violet dressing gown that seemed to match her eyes, and for all her small stature, she exuded a sense of power and strength. Jimmy Lee, I am so glad you brought her here to see me. Josie, dear, please call me Florine. It doesn't do to be too formal. Miss Florine had a small dog under one arm with a big boob and his top knot of hair. And she laid the dog down beside her and reached out a hand to welcome us. Her hand had long, thin fingers covered with more rings than I thought our jeweler had in his store. One that I noticed was a red purple beryl ring that seemed to glow on her finger. And her ring seemed an essential part of her and looked as elegant as she did. And stretched around her wrist was a ring of keys, which she removed and set aside on a nearby table. And around her neck, she wore a pearl shaped amethyst necklace, anchored to the chain by what looked to be a diamond. And I couldn't help but stare at that necklace. And she caught me staring, and I said to her, You are wearing the most gorgeous necklace I have ever seen. And she smiled and said, my late husband had it made for me by a special jeweler. I love it dearly and wear it almost everywhere. It's a special connection and a daily reminder of our wonderful relationship. I'd hoped to pass it on to a daughter, but that never happened for us. Taking me by the hand, she led me into the room with a little dog trotting by her side. Now, Josie, I expect that you're the wonderful master seamstress that I've heard so much about. Well, yes, I'm Josie, but I don't know that I'm all that about a master seamstress. I just know how to sew. I felt too awed and nervous to say too much. I make most of my own clothes and alterations of clothes for my friends. And may I pat your dog? I asked, not certain if this would be proper etiquette or not, but I felt uncertain as to how to continue. I felt it best to talk about something comfortable. Of course, Miss Florine said, he loves all the attention he can get. The dog nodded his head as if agreeing with his mistress' comments, and his blue bow wiggled and wobbled as he did. And I leaned over to pat him on his head, careful not to disturb the bow. Oh, merciful heavens. I remembered almost giggling, thinking how Queenie, that was her own little beetle, would look with a pink bow on her head. His name is Diamond. Miss Florine stooped and pulled up the dog's muzzle to show a large white diamond shape on his chest. See, he's wearing a diamond, and that's what I like most to wear as jewelry. We have the same sort of taste. That's why I chose him as a puppy. And she stood up, she straightened and looked, turned to face me. Did you make the frock you're wearing? And on her lips, it didn't sound like she was calling my dress a frumpy homemade house dress, which in my mind that was. And I said, yes, ma'am, I made this dress. I said, as the heat rose up my neck, through my throat, and all the way up to the top of my head. And she looked at one of the sleeves and said, may I touch your arm, please? And I said, oh, yeah, that's quite all right. Very fine stitches. Did your mother help you with this? Oh, no, my mother's been dead for over 2 years now, I told her. Oh, dear heavens, you were little more than a baby, she said, as her bright violet eyes shadowed over. I am so very sorry. That must have been painful for you. Yes, ma'am, it happened on my birthday. And I thought that made me sound way too pitiful, so I added, she made me a cake first.
Oh, oh my God. I loved Miss Florine. I mean, that was
Yeah,
really such a great, and it's just, I could just feel when you would open up her wardrobes and there would just be because I grew up with showgirls too, in Las Vegas. So it's like when you were opening up those things and I was the feathers and the boas and the 20s dresses and it just, I just absolutely loved her and I loved the relationship and it was just a really a special thing that you could bring out and not only teach us what these houses were like, but anyway, tell me what your husband thought about you creating this world about his mother.
well, he said she'd be turning over her grave.
Ah, did
But
you?
no, and that's on the same, you know, we did not know all the things that she'd accomplished until I found her diaries, and then she had a little box of stuff with all of her things that she had gotten from the LaSalle Hotel and all those things that she had
Oh, I
gotten,
love to
all
see.
the awards and all the things. She never meant talked about it.
Yeah, right.
The yeah, I mean, she never mentioned all these things that she had done. It was just like, oh well, I'm just a wife and a mother, and
And
never
she was
mentioned all
far
this.
from it, far from just that. I mean, what an exciting life.
Yeah,
What an exciting life she had.
yeah.
And again, today is publication day for Hardly a Lady by Frances Strickler by Rabbit House Press. So you're gonna do some fun readings, hopefully here in Lexington, at the Carnegie Center and some other places. But what is the most important thing for you in getting her story out or this story out?
Well, I think it's just learning that there's a lot about our own state that we don't know, and how important it is to look at your own history. We travel all over the world to see things when we right here at home can see so much and miss so much
In
and
Kentucky,
learn so much from our own history.
there's such a rich history in Kentucky, so many different things. And we were talking about that at the Carnegie Center the other night at the Poets Laureate event, and somebody asked, what did Kentucky choose you, or did you choose Kentucky? And Silas House and Frank X. Walker and Crystal Wilkinson and all of them were, and George Ella Lyon was talking, and it was so,
Yeah.
they were talking about having like such a complicated history with Kentucky because it is so, I mean, it's a hotbed for all kinds of things since the very beginning.
Oh, yes. And there's so many details, so much that people are not informed about or that
Right,
don't know about.
right.
And I think that's important for us,
In both your books,
because
but I mean, of course, I'm partial to this one because we're publishing it, but both of your books
yes,
really, interesting and a beautiful way to teach us of our history and the personalities that are, born and raised here in Kentucky. And so,
and I'm just pleased that you've really taken it underhand and really worked with it and brought it to life for me.
well, congratulations, congratulations. And I hope that everyone picks up a copy of Hardly a Lady. And stay tuned because we're going to be talking about Frances's um, readings that are coming up. I'm sure we'll do a reading at a Likely Story in Midway and the Carnegie Center in Lexington. And she'll have her book available. It's available everywhere today, anywhere if you just want to hop on Amazon and get it. It's available there in Barnes Noble and everywhere. Today, Hardly a Lady. Congratulations, Frances. We're
Thank you
so
so
proud of
much, and thank you for all the work you've done and your staff. Really appreciate them. They've
you.
been
Yeah, Daphne
very
Vorel,
patient.
the designer Daphne Vorel was amazing. Well, and
Yes,
we're very happy with her. And Emily sends her love and
yes.
thanks and congratulations. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you all in the next edition of Rabbit House Press Author Spotlight. Thank you, Frances Strickler.
Thank you so much for having me with you. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. We'll see
Namaste.
you today.
I put that part in.
Yes, definitely. Namaste.
And have a great Easter for you
Yes, yes. Happy
and
Easter.
everyone.
All right. Take care, Frances.